Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be about the first matchup in the Awaken the Beast tournament that has been held a couple of weeks ago. So my first draw was against Demon Legions, and I am playing the list on the right. The Demon Legions list is on the left. So in this video, well, as I'm making this video, I am recording it before the tournament, so I'm going to do my predictions, and then also after the tournament I'll record a bit more to give a very short battle report of how it went. So did everything go according to expectations, or did I really make some misjudgments here and there? So what does my opponent have? He's gonna have a Scourge, the Vanadra Scourge, and a Harbinger of Father Chaos. Together these form his magic phase. I think it's quite okay for demons to just have 2 wizard adepts, because you're going to channel 2 for the army anyway, so with a channel 4 in the army, 2 wizard adepts seems fine. And then otherwise he has 3 times 10 Myrmidons, 2 times 10 Succubi, 2 Blazing Glories with Cloven Hoofs, 2 units of 3 Brazen Beasts, 2 times 5 Sirens and 5 Furies. So this is a heavily MSU type army list. And I think with Demon Legions in general it is really challenging to play, because everything is fearless, which makes MSU play that much more difficult and much more unforgiving. So I don't know the skill level of my opponent, but it definitely is a tough list to play with. It's a list that can work really well if you put it in the right hands, but then again, I'm uncertain whether it's the right hands or not. So how am I gonna try to beat this list? Well, I have multiple answers within my army to the different choices that my opponent is fielding. So one advantage I have over his list is that my list, every single piece in my list can actually contribute to the matchup. So my Chosen Lords are going to be vital. The Chief on the Shadow Chaser is going to be immense. The Sorcerers, well, they'll just provide me with a magic phase. The Warriors are going to be useful. The Chimeras are going to be useful. The Warrior Knights, Ratchet Ones and Elmore, and also the Marauding Giant. Everything is going to be useful. Whilst in his list, I think his Succubi are going to be less useful, other than to be able to mop up my Barbarians, but my Barbarians are gonna hang back anyway. And otherwise he has the Sirens as chaff. I think they're vital in his army, but I don't know to what extent he will be. He will know that I will maybe not even care about his chaff. And he also invested upgrades like Kaleidoscopic Flash that are useless against my list. The Shatina skills, I can imagine that you put it on the Scourge to protect him from small arms fire, but I don't have any of this, so it's going to be only useful against my Hellfire. And yeah, otherwise that really depends in some matchups what's going to happen. So he has some pieces that I have to be careful about. So the things that I worry the most about are the Scourge, obviously. The Blazing Glories and the Brazen Beasts. The Myrmidons, they have Strength 5 and they have Lightning Reflexes, but they only have 1 attack each, and they only have AP 1, so against my Warriors I'll still have a 5 up armor save. Against my Warrior Knights I'll still have a 2 up armor save. Yeah, and his Brazen Beasts and Blazing Glory, he has a lot of those, but with the Helmor I can move around quicker than he can, and the Chimeras can also outmaneuver his units. So it is going to be interesting what he's going to do with the Blazing Glories. I think I will try to just catch anything in his list, basically, with the Ratchet Ones. Ideally the Blazing Glories or the Sirens. I might survive charging into the Sirens or into the Furies. And then even with a damaged Ratchet One, if I can get it into a Blazing Glory, I still will inflict d6+1 hits on him. And yeah, if I only do like 1 or 2 wounds, that's already enough to tone down the power level of these Blazing Glories immensely. Because taking 1 wound on these models makes that they go from an offense and defense of 10 to 8. And on my list, on my pieces that actually are built for combat, the lowest offensive and defensive is 5, except for the giant, but I don't think he'll put a blazing glory into the giant. So with offensive defensive 5, he will be hitting me on 3+ instead of 2+, and I'll be hitting him on 5+ instead of 6+. I think the 1 wound is really the 1 wound that makes a big difference on these pieces. So yeah, the big elephant in the room is obviously the Vanadra Scourge. In the end, he only has 7 wounds. I only have to do 7 wounds and then he's gone. Once he's gone, it's going to be way harder for my opponent. So my opponent has some tools in his arsenal to deal with my Chosen Lords, for example. So he has the Blazing Glories that have AP 5 that basically ignore my armor. Then again, my Chosen Lords go before his Blazing Glories. I will likely do some wounds to them. So yeah, even if I do 3 wounds, he'll still be hitting me on 4+ and winning me on 4+, so he might get a wound through. But otherwise he doesn't have any clear answers to my Chosen Lords. He might think that the Brazen Beasts are a good counter, but with the Helmor and the ability of me to flee from his charge, I don't think the Brazen Beasts are gonna have the advantage. So he basically only has the Scourge to deal with my Lords. And the Scourge is a nice piece against my Lords, but in the grind I think we lose wounds at a kind of a similar rate. So my first Chosen Lord, he has spared weapons, and so he ignores the parry of the Scourge. And he has Kingslayer. The Scourge is a character, so I go to 7 attacks at strength 6. I have an offensive of 8, so I hit him on 2+. I have a strength 6, so I wound him on 4+. So that should be around 3 to 4 wounds every turn. Then you still have his Aegis save of a 4+ in combat, so that should be 1 to 2 wounds every single turn. And back to me. Well, he starts with 7 attacks, I believe. He's gonna hit me on 3+, because he has offensive 7, if I'm right, with the whip-cracked tail, so 3+. He's gonna wound me on a 2+ because of the strength 7. He has AP 4, so I only have a 5+ armor save left, but I do get my either my Death Cheater or my ward save. So in the end, I think he would also go to 1 or 2 wounds a turn. Yeah, and even then, it's not even too bad of a trade to just point for point exchange wounds for me. And that is mostly because I also have some supportive magic that can help me with dealing with his Scourge. So I do have Hellfire, I do have Haste in the Hour. Haste in the Hour is going to also be useful to put a couple of wounds on the Blazing Glories, as well as on Hellfire actually. And in addition, I still have the Warrior Knights that can charge in onto the Scourge. If I'm able to charge on his front or his flank, I might run these guys 4 wide. So that I can get an extra attack on his Scourge. Maybe it's not worth it. Probably I should just run them 5 wide. And yeah, if I charge him, I'm gonna have 9 attacks that hit him on 4+ because of the parry. I might get Spectral Blades in my army also. So in some situations I'll be able to reroll. So if I don't get a reroll, I'm gonna hit him with 9 attacks, 4+ to hit, 4+ to wound. So it's gonna be like 2 wounds. It's gonna be 1 wound after saves. That is not that ideal, but then he's gonna strike back with 8 attacks, hitting me on 2+, sorry, and winning me on 2+. Yeah, that might not be the good matchup after all. But the 15 warriors might be a bit better. So there is a couple of ways that I can just put a couple of wins on him. And the funny thing is that once he has taken like 4 or 5 wounds, it becomes really tricky for him to still get some revenue out of this model. because of the agility 0. So at that point he can't really use it for a lot of plays anymore. I also still have an important piece in my army for the Scorch, which is the Marauding Giant. So I have 7 hit points, and that is quite tough for a Scorch to beat in one turn. So ideally what would happen is that he is gonna charge me, or I'm gonna charge him. More ideally is that if he charges me, because he doesn't have a counter charge. But worst case scenario for me, I'm still fresh and I haven't taken any wounds on my giant. And then he charges me. I'm gonna go first with 5 attacks. 4 up to hit, 4 up to wound. I'll do a wound that he might not save, hopefully. That becomes the 3 wounds. And then the next turn, well, he does his damage on my Marauding Giant. It is quite unlikely that he will kill it in one go. But he might. If he doesn't, then it's going to be a world of pain, because then I'm going to have like 10 attacks that hit on 4+. I'm going to put every bit of magic I can onto it to get either a reroll to hit or a reroll to wound. And then I'm going to make quick work of his Scourge, I think. Because with 10 attacks even, I have 5 hits, and then to wound, it would be 2 wounds, with a reroll to wound is 3, maybe even 4 wounds. He's gonna make 2 Aegis saves, so that's 4 wounds on him, because of the multiple wounds. And after the first round, already 2 wounds. That is a really good trade for me, so I would like to have the Marauding Giant against the Scourge, and then I can finish him off with some other piece. Yeah, so for that I'm not too afraid. I think it might be quite important to get Giant into the Scorch, because otherwise the efficiency at which I trade with him is going to be lower. But also every single turn that he's not going to be in combat, I will be able to cast Hellfire on him for 2d6 strength 6 with AP 0. He's going to have a 5+5 against that, so he will practically halve the wounds, but I will be able to get like 1 or 2 wounds through each turn, hopefully. Yeah, and then it's just a question of him noticing that I can still flee with some pieces. I don't know what his discipline is. It's probably 9, but he doesn't have a BSB, so he might even fail the redirect. And then if he charges 2 units, if I advance quite aggressively with a line that can flee, that's going to be useful against the Blazing Glories, against the Brazen Beasts, and against the Scourge. So I think I should go for the first turn just to put the pressure on, lure out the charge of my opponent with a Sorcerer that can cast onto his Scourge in the Barbarians, then flee with the Barbarians, rally the next turn, and see where that leads. I mean, even if my opponent really goes after my Barbarians and the Sorcerers, if he manages to get both units of the Sorcerers through the game, he's gonna end up with like 800 points, and that's it. So that's not even too bad. Yeah, so that is everything about the Scourge, really. Otherwise, we have his core, so the Myrmidons and the Succubi are not too much of a worry to me. Because my combat prowess is mostly in the Warriors and the Warrior Knights and Chimeras and the Barbarian Chief, and none of these models care about his core, to be honest. So the Chimera is the one that preferentially goes into the Succubi rather than the Myrmidons, because they have strength 5. But even then, if I go in, I have 5 attacks that hit them on 3s, that wound them on 2s, and a Stomp at strength 5. What he does back to me is gonna be, yeah, so he's gonna strike later because he's only agility 4, as long as I charge. So it's gonna be like 6 attacks probably, 6 or 7 attacks that hit me on a 3+, that wound me on a 4+. So I will survive that. He only has AP 1, so I still have a 5 of armor saver left. He actually hits me on a 2+ with the Whipcrack tail. But it's not a matchup that I'm too concerned about. He will lose the matchup, maybe fail the break test, lose a couple of models. Maybe in the grind he will beat my Chimera, but then again, I can also use the mobility of my chimeras to try and charge in the flanks. His blazing glories are likely gonna play on the flanks. I do have my barbarian chief. Well, he's not the best counter against it. I think maybe the wretched ones are useful against this. The chimeras are useful against this. The marauding giant can go in, and it's not that interesting. I can perfectly zone them with my chosen lords, because if I get to strike first, then I do get the impact hits. So I'll just zone them out with that, hopefully. But yeah, they are 300 point pieces. If they go into my warriors, they trade up basically, because the warriors, they lose quite some models to them with the D3 plus 1 impact hits and the 5 attacks that start at offensive 10. But even then, he will likely kill like 4 or 5 warriors in the first round, then I'll be steadfast, I will stick, and then the next round he might still be able to kill 1 or 2 warriors, 2 warriors probably, and then he'll be gone, because the warriors will finish him off, probably. Brazen Beasts, also not too concerned about those. If you run the numbers and if he charges into my warriors whilst they're still fresh, he's also gonna get stuck and get ground down by the warriors. Brazen Beasts are really scary. They are really scary if they get off the charge. If they don't get the charge, they're not that scary. So I can even put a chimera into 1 unit. In the flank, then he's gonna have 2 attacks for his beast, 1 attack for his rider. That's not gonna pull it, so he will likely lose a beast in either the first or the second round. If he doesn't lose it the first round, he's going to be steadfast. If he does lose it, he's going to even have to take a test at a minus at a negative modifier. So that is also a matchup that is quite positive for me. And also, yeah, the only things that my chosen lords have to worry about in this list are the Scourge, and to some extent the Blazing Glories if they manage to charge me. But then again, we didn't consider yet the effect of the Helmor. That's going to be quite a big effect. My army, I am now speaking about the ideal situation, so I am still going to have some negative trade-ups in terms of chaff. Where I basically have to commit part of my list to remove his chaff. But yeah, in the end, that's likely gonna end up with me having pieces in unfortunate locations. Hopefully, that's gonna be the chimeras and the barbarian chief, because they can just flee on a resulting charge of my opponent. I think the barbarian chief can play a pivotal role also in this matchup. As long as I'm able to dodge the blazing glories, it's going to be fine. Because the 1-up armor save is something that my opponent is going to struggle with. So not only on the chosen lord, but also on the barbarian chief. So even though he just ignores armor, the 4 strength 5 attacks are still going to be useful against a plethora of choices in his army, like for example the Brazen Beast. So I think it's going to be quite alright. It also depends on the scenario, obviously. So my opponent has quite a strong scenario play with the 5 units of 10 scoring. And I don't know if Brazen Beasts are scoring, but they probably are. So in terms of scenario, you would say that he has the advantage. Because my barbarians are going to hold back. The warrior knights and the warriors, they also have the role of scorers, so that is going to be a bit tricky maybe. But usually what happens is that the warrior knights, they go into something, they possibly together with the chosen lord, they go through. I might get some losses, and at the point where I only have the champion left, I'm gonna just use it to score somewhere. But by that time, they also already did their they already fulfilled their role. Yeah. yeah, I'm quite curious what is going to happen. So what is also a possibility still is that my opponent is going to charge his Scourge into my Warrior Knights. Then I can just take the challenge or issue a duel with my champion. He's going to maul my champion, but he's going to have a charge. 2 wounds on the champion, 3 extra combat res. Yeah, that is a lot. That is 6 combat res. That's not going to be enough even with Pride probably. Because I'll have a rerollable minimized discipline 3 check. Yeah, that's not going to work out. Yeah, so these are basically my thoughts so far. The one thing I didn't mention yet is that my opponent is also able to go for his hereditary spell. His hereditary is the Spear of Infinity. Otherwise he has Witchcraft and Evocation, so he can go for Haste in the Hour. I still have an Aegis save or a Regent save on the characters that I care about. I mean, he can do a single wound to my Barbarian Chief, that is fine by me. He can do 3 wounds to the Warrior Knights or the Warriors, that would be less tasty. So that is something in Evocation that I might not like. He can also go for reroll to hit or reroll to wound, obviously. And with Witchcraft, I think he will go for Raven's Wing to just boost his mobility. Otherwise, Twisted Effigy is not going to be that useful. What else? Deceptive Glamour is not going to be that useful, I think. And I actually forgot what the other Witchcraft spell is that he's going to be able to do, but it's not Will-O-the-Wisp. So Will-O-the-Wisp is the number 5 random movement spell. That is a really, really important spell in the Witchcraft deck, which is the reason why I really like having a Wizard Master on Witchcraft. But he doesn't have that, so he can still go for his Hereditary, the 4-up strength 5 hit with multiple wounds 2, but it only has AP 2. So against my Chosen Lords, I'll still have a 3+ Aegis save against this, or 3+ armor save against it, and then I'll still have a 4-up Aegis or Regen save against it. And then the Chosen Lord with the Weird Stone even just ignores the first hit. So those are all things I don't care about too much. Yeah. So it's really gonna depend on how he plays his Scourge also. So either he goes in offensively and I can hopefully get in my Marauding Giant. So I think I should drop for second. Well, not drop, but just wait for my opponent to drop for first, basically. And then counter as I go. I don't think the advantage of the Helmar in this scenario is that pivotal. Because basically the battle line matchup, in the sense of just having our armies clash frontally, is already favorable for me. So I don't need extra help with that. So instead I will wait for him to drop, tell me where his pieces are going to be. That does allow his Sirens for a nasty screening of my lines. So I think I'm going to drop everything 2 inches away from my deployment line and have the Wretched Ones at the line of the deployment, so that my Wretched Ones can always go into his Sirens anywhere he deploys them, so that I practically I cannot be chaffed then first turn. And even then, yeah, the Wretched Ones are... This is the reason that I put the Wretched Ones on the list. I found that with Warriors in general, that I had a little bit of issues with removing chaff. These single Wretched Ones, they're amazing at just removing some chaff. So my opponent, he will likely just damage them quite severely. I don't know if 5 Sirens are going to be enough to remove a single Wretched One. It depends also on how he deploys them. But I also still have my Barbarian Chief with the 6-inch Vanguard to zone out some of his Siren play. So probably the Barbarian Chief is going to go in the middle. Then I'm gonna wait for my opponent's Vanguard, then I can counter his Vanguard with my Chief. And I have the Wretched ones, one on each flank, but they're not gonna be the things that I'll deploy down first. I think the first thing to deploy is the Helmor, then the Chimeras, then the Barbarians, and by then I have done 5 drops. My opponent has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 drops if he uses the Dark Hide on the Succubi. So 5 drops in, he's either gonna already deploy his Myrmidons and the Brazen Beasts, or he's already going into the juicy stuff like the Blazing Glories and the Sirens. But if he goes for first drop, well, he's not going to go for first drop until he deploys the Sirens. Once he deploys the Sirens, I'm going to know where they are. So for me, it's going to be Chimera, Barbarians, Helmor, the Warriors I can also deploy. By that time, I kind of know where my opponent's going to focus his forces and where I can pull off like a feint deployment, which is to mean that I'll have a Helmor token on one of his flanks, likely. Possibly with his army list around halfway point of the battlefield, because he's going to be a bit aggressive. So one of them is going to be at the flanks. I'm going to overload. I'm going to evenly space out my army. I'm going to first turn of mine, I'm going to put a Helmar token on the token that I think my opponent is quite scary on. And I'm going to teleport towards the side where I had my token in the first place. So by the time that my opponent has deployed all of his Myrmidons and probably the Brazen Beasts, I think, I'm going to be able to know where the rest kind of goes. So I can counter his army quite effectively. The Marauding Giant is going to be one of the last pieces to go down. The Wretched ones are going to be late. And then this is going to be a matchup that's going to be okay. I'm quite confident about this. But we'll see how it goes at the tournament. So my opponent did manage to win the roll for deployment. So he chose the table side, and I was allowed to choose who was gonna deploy first. I chose my opponent, and he decided to drop everything because, in his opinion, he had a very flexible and aggressive list. So he thought he would benefit from it. This did allow me to get some positive matchups on the board already from the deployment roll. So on my left flank, I had my 2 Chariot Lords that were gonna probably later be able to move through portals. On my right flank, I had my Warrior Knights and my infantry. The Wretched ones were a little bit ahead of everything else, just to be able to annoy my opponent, basically. And then my opponent moved up a little, and in my first turn, I had a first turn charge on an 11 with both Chariot Lords on Blazing Glories. And I had a first turn charge on a 10 with my Warrior Knights into the Succubi. And if I would make this, then I would get an overrun into his Sirens plus his Herald. So I was quite confident starting my first turn. I declared all these 3 charges. His Blazing Glories were in the center of the field. If my Chariot Lords went in, they would still have an overrun or a reform somewhere and would still be fine. And his Scourge was behind the Sirens with the Herald, so he couldn't really use it that offensively. He didn't really threaten my lines with it, so I was really happy with that. Yeah, and for these charges, the Chariot Lords, they failed, but they only went up a couple of inches, so they still threatened his entire lines. So he couldn't really advance aggressively on the middle of the board. The first turn charge on a 10 with the Warrior Knights did manage, so if you declare like a couple of these charges, then one of them is kind of bound to occur. And it did happen that I went into the Succubi and overran into his Herald, so his magic was shut down quite quickly, actually. And then for me, Hasten the Hour and Hellfire, the combination and teleporting through portal to be in range for my magic really helped on the Scourge. So in the end, I only needed magic to take down the Scourge with the best round, just getting off both Hellfire and Ace in the Hour for 3 wins on the Scourge. Yeah, that really helped. I think in general for demons, it's really good to have two of these greater demons on the board, and you see that a lot of times in tournament games also. Um, yeah, otherwise my opponent he was guarding my first portal on the board with 2 units of Myrmidons. And this is a bit of a weird thing. I get that he was doing it because he wanted to have some reaction to the portal, but units of 10 Myrmidons are not big enough to threaten anything that I can put through the portal. So I don't really have to worry about them, and that means that I can still teleport the warriors with the halberds through. I can still teleport my chariot lords through. It doesn't really matter to me. And the other MVP of the game was the Barbarian Chief, who held up his Succubi and Myrmidons on the right flank. Um, and he had a unit of Brazen Beasts that charged my Chariot Lord and actually bounced from them. Like they did 1 wound on the charge, and then my Chariot Lord just grinded them out. So this went really well. In the end, it was a 20-0 for me, and it was the first game of the tournament. So after still 2 more were to follow. In the end, I ended up playing a similar Demon Legion round, the Demon Legion army in the second round, and then in the last round I played against Warriors of the Dark Gods. The second round I also won. It was a bit of a better demon or a more experienced Demon Legion player. So that only became a 17-3, but he thought it was a really bad matchup for him. And the last round against Yetro, my alchemy mage really went mental. Killed his Chaos Lord, killed his warrior mage on the war shrine, and that ended in a 15-5. And in the end, I actually won the tournament with this list. So I was really happy about this. And yeah, for now, this is going to be the end of me using this list probably. So I will see you for the next one.